Merkel. Mandela remains an inspiration. German politicians reacted with shock and dismay to the death of Nelson Mandela, the South African ex-president and Nobel Peace Prize laureate will be forever linked with the struggle against apartheid. Hero, statesman, idol. The condolence messages from around the world expressed great sadness after the passing away on Thursday, December 5, 2013, of South Africa's first black president, Nelson Mandela. They also expressed great respect for Mandela, a recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize, who fought against apartheid and paid a high price for his struggle. In a letter to Mandela's widow, Greta Merkel, German President Johann Gauck was full of praise for the freedom fighter. Despite spending 27 humiliating years in prison, including 18 years spent in the infamous Robben Island prison, he found the courage and the strength to lead his country on the non-violent path to democracy, Gauck wrote. For her part, German Chancellor Angela Merkel said Mandela's name will be forever linked with the struggle against the oppression of his people and the overcoming of the apartheid regime. Mandela's shining example and his political legacy of nonviolence and the rejection of all forms of racism will long remain an inspiration for people around the world. Sigmar Gabriel, party chairman of the Social Democrats (SPD), recalled how the anti-apartheid icon stretched out his arms to his former tormentors. Upon his release from prison by President F.W. de Klerk, he thereby laid the foundation for the Rainbow Nation South Africa, Gabriel said. Frank-Walter Steinmeier, the chairman of the SPD parliamentary group, said Nelson Mandela had changed the world. The world has lost a hero. Oppressors must also be liberated. On the occasions of the International Day for Human Rights on Friday, December 6, 2013, a visibly moved President Gauck spoke of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission set up by Mandela to investigate politically motivated crimes perpetrated under the apartheid regime. He was convinced that not only the oppressed but also the oppressor must be liberated, said Gauck. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission was an important step in this direction. Despite the humiliating years in prison, Mandela found the courage and the strength not to follow the path of hatred. Gauck asked the audience present to observe a moment of silence in honor of Mandela, whose life and work would remain a source of inspiration and encouragement. Guido Westerwelle, Germany's foreign minister, said Mandela had become a symbol for the fight against inequality and racism, and for overcoming hatred, in short, for a better world. Mandela's political visions of peace and freedom were a cause for hope and inspiration for people in Africa and around the world. Westerwelle said. The chairman of the Evangelical Church in Germany, EKD, Nicholas Schneider, praised Mandela as an ambassador of conscience who had pursued religious tolerance and dialogue between religions and who rejected all forms of human discrimination. The world has lost its most humble leader, he said. Hurricane Xaver blasted through Germany. Gale force winds from Hurricane Xaver wreaked havoc across Germany with gusts up to 160 kilometers per hour. Flights, trains, schools, and Christmas markets were cancelled or closed as precaution. Northern Germany hit hard. With hurricane force winds, Xaver rampaged across Germany with wind speeds up to 160 kilometers per hour. The storm uprooted trees, tore off roofs, and caused tide surge along the North Sea coast. As a precaution, many flights, trains, and schools were closed or cancelled, and Christmas markets remained shuttered. Preparing for the flood. Xaver is one of the worst storms to hit Germany in decades. With sandbags in front of houses and protection on windows and doors, the residents of northern Germany worked feverishly to ward off the worst. Raging in northern Europe. Before hitting the German coast, Xaver raced across Britain. In Scotland, a truck driver died after a gust of wind seized his vehicle and knocked it over. Winds in England were measured at more than 200 kilometers per hour. About 100,000 homes were left without electricity, and train service in the country has been completely shut down. Planes grounded. Xaver brought traffic to a halt in many places. At the Hamburg airport in northern Germany, about 130 flights were cancelled. Many trains stayed in their depots and toppled trees blocked roads and rail links. School was cancelled in several regions, but children couldn't spend their free time outside. People were urged to stay indoors during the storm. A reminder of 1962. Xaver has brought to mind memories of past gale, particularly in Hamburg. In 1962, more than 300 people died when the storm surge flooded the city. At that time, however, the city was quite different. Hamburg is now much better protected with the Dike and other flood protection system. A healthy winter lifestyle. With large family meals, office parties, cookies, and glass wine around the corner, staying healthy is going to be a tough task, but a healthy lifestyle is important, especially for kids. Gingerbread, cookies, and coke. One major obstacle to keeping fit in the weeks leading up to Christmas is the many holiday cookies and chocolates that have been adorning grocery store shelves since September. Every German eats roughly 7.5 kilograms of cookies a year, and half of that is Christmas fare like gingerbread or spice cookies, according to the German Association of Candy Producers. Nuts for nuts. A healthy alternative to all these sweets are nuts. Hazelnuts or chestnuts, roasted on an open fire, are tied to a lower risk of early death, according to a study published in the New England Journal of Medicine. The study says that people whose diet is rich in nuts are less likely to die from cancer or heart disease. Couch potatoes. Another way to combat all the fat and sugar ingested during the holiday season is to exercise regularly. but it's especially young people who are spending more and more time in front of screens than being active. The American Academy of Pediatrics estimates that children spend an average of 7 hours a day on entertainment media such as computers, TVs, and smartphones, and slow runners. This inertia is one of the reasons for the results of a study presented at an American Heart Association conference. Kids these days can run as fast as their parents could when they were kids. Over a mile, kids run about 90 seconds slower than their parents would done 30 years ago. So it will take them longer to run into the living room to open their presents on Christmas Day. Widespread obesity. The lack of physical activity and all that Christmas candy can quickly lead to weight gain. For children worldwide, that's an issue regardless of the season. According to the World Health Organization's Childhood Obesity Surveillance Initiative, on average, every third child aged 6 to 9 is overweight or obese. Get out and get moving. A good way to avoid the weight gain trap this winter is to be more active. Children should get at least 1 hour of physical activity a day to stay fit. So, instead of watching Elf or Santa Claus for the 100th time, families could go ice skating or burn calories in a snowball fight. Santa Claus is running to town. A growing tradition among Christmas enthusiasts and athletes alike are the Santa runs. For these special races, participants dressed up as Father Christmas to jog off their winter calories. For the organizer of the Santa Hostel Race series in the US, health doesn't seem to be a primary factor, though they offer cookie stations along the course. Biden, Xi mutes on East China Sea Islands dispute. U.S. Vice President Joe Biden has emerged from talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing, without mentioning a row over a new maritime flyover zone declared by China. Instead, Biden praised Xi for his candor. Future Chinese-U.S. relations had to be based on trust and would play a significant part further into the 21st century. As U.S. Vice President Joe Biden on Wednesday during his visit to Beijing, Xi described Biden as an old friend who had long worked to improve China-U.S. ties, adding that China and the U.S. should strengthen dialogue and cooperation. The shift to a courteous tone followed Biden's remark in Tokyo on Tuesday, while meeting Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, that the U.S. was deeply concerned by China's attempt to unilaterally change the status quo in the East China Sea. Biden has pledged to Abe that he would raise those concerns with great specificity in the conversation with Xi and other Chinese leaders. The Biden-Xi encounter lasted 2 hours, an hour longer than planned, and preceded a second round of talks involving larger delegations. Afterwards, Biden told reporters, "Candor creates trust. Trust is the basis on which real change constructive change is made. Maritime aviation tensions. Japan has been on edge for 2 weeks since China unilaterally declared an air zone spanning disputed islands and demanded that planes file flight plans before entering. The zone covers the Japanese-controlled Senkaku Islands, where oil and gas reserves are believed to lie under the adjacent seabed. China claims the island under the name of Diaoyu. Taiwan called them Diaoyu Tai. South Korea has also said its military aircraft has flown through the zone without reporting to Chinese authorities. Competitions for regional leadership. As Biden and Xi met on Wednesday, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Hong Li insisted that the zone falls within China's sovereignty. It is a necessary measure taken by China in exercising its justiciable self-defense rights, Hong said. Earlier on Wednesday, China's military had warned Japan and the US that it was fully capable of exercising control over its self-declared air zone. An international relations expert at the People's University in Beijing, Chen Yaohe, said the tensions reflected the competitions for leadership in East Asia. European Central Bank in search of staff. The European Central Bank, ECB, is in search of some 1,000 people to fill positions in the new banking supervision unit. Observers are calling it a vanguard in financial controlling. It's certainly a first for Europe. Caroline Wanke has exactly 12 months to find 1,000 new employees for Europe's top bank, a mammoth task. She is the head of personal recruitment at the ECB, a 10-person team that spends its days pursuing applications from hopefuls around the continent. They must be EU citizens, must have at least a bachelor's degree, and extensive work experience. Whether they are bankers, accountants, or consultants, each applicants must be well versed in bank sheets and risk management. The ECB is looking for 770 bank inspectors, in addition to IT experts, lawyers, actuaries, and employees in human resources. All positions are to be filled by November 2014, by which time the ECB is to begin controlling Europe's biggest banks. Top managers first. Willeke used headhunters to find candidates for the top jobs. We decided to go with the top-down approach to select our banking supervisor, said the recruiter told DW. They want to fill positions in top management first, then in middle management. The director generals are to choose their own department and branch heads. This has the advantage that they can build their own teams. They can have a good overview of how the teams work together and choose the best one, says Willeke. Her teams have been advertising the opening of all over Europe. They have been traveling all around the continent answering questions regarding the jobs and offer, the salaries and potential bonuses, and what life is like in Frankfurt. We emphasized that we are also looking for female candidates to fill top positions, said Welke, adding that clear goals has been laid out for what percentage of the jobs would be filled by women. There are 1,000 jobs to fill, and this provides a great opportunity to move forward in this regard. This comes after the ECB's nomination of Daniel Novi to the head the institution's supervisory agency. If the European Parliament and Council give their approval, she could start work as Europe's top banking supervisor by the end of the year. Inspection already underway. The first 79 bank inspectors began their work already in the summer. Envoy from European central banks and national supervisory boards of EU states, a kind of vanguard that will have the task of drawing up the blueprints for future banking inspection. Karen Shine of Ireland is one of these people. The 32-year-old is working on regulating fees for European banks. What we're doing is seen as a kind of pioneer mission for bank supervision, said Shine, adding that she was able to use the knowledge she gained in Ireland in this new task. Shine was a financial controller in Dublin, but she's keen to stay in Frankfurt for at least another year, having just renewed her contracts with the ECB. 5 different groups have been set up in Frankfurt, including 2 that are to draft a legal framework for banking supervision. The other are to determine which banks to inspect and how to inspect them, while another is to prepare the specifics of the audit. More than half of the envoys are from Germany, Portugal, Spain, and Italy. More than one move. Another massive project currently underway at the ECB is to finish in the summer of 2014 constructions of a new headquarters in the Frankfurt district of Ostend. Around 2,300 employees will be moving, not including the 1,000 candidates for the new supervisory position. But there's a problem. There may not be enough room. The new building had already been planned, with a maximum capacity of 2,800. We're short of the 3,300 people the ECB will be employing at that point. The solution is for the new banking supervisors to move back into the old ECB building, the Euro Tower in downtown Frankfurt, once the big move has taken place. In any event, regardless of what building they're in, by next summer the ECB will be monitoring not only financial policy in the EU, it will also be inspecting the bloc's biggest banks. Berlin and Moscow at odds over Ukraine. Ukraine may become a bone of contention between Berlin and Moscow. Russia criticized a visit to Kiev by German Foreign Minister Westerwelle, and now Chancellor Merkel plans to support opposition leader Vitaly Klitschko. About 9 years ago, in late November 2004, Germany's then Chancellor Gerhard Schröder called Russian President Vladimir Putin to discuss Ukraine. Hundreds of thousands of demonstrators were out on the streets of the capital, protesting against a rigging presidential election in what became known as the Orange Revolution. Let us help ensure the situation doesn't get out of hand, Schroeder told Putin. We need a democratic, peaceful Ukraine. At the time, Russia sided with Viktor Yanukovych. Putin congratulated him on his victory. The protests continued peacefully. Fresh elections were held, and Russia didn't interfere. Yanukovych only became president 6 years later after the polls in 2010. Russia sparked the crisis. Chancellor Angela Merkel hasn't yet reached for the phone to discuss the current political crisis in Ukraine with Putin, but she has every reason to do so. The situation in Ukraine is as tense as it was in 2004. For weeks, hundreds of thousands of people have been demonstrating on the streets of Kiev in favor of integrating Ukraine into the European Union. Russian pressure on Ukraine was one of the factors that sparkled the crisis. According to the government in Kiev, Moscow threatened trade restrictions if Ukraine signed an association agreement with the EU. The Ukrainian leadership backed off and put the accord on hold, a move that became the catalyst for the mass protest. Difficult role for Germany. Many Ukrainians would like Berlin to meditate. They believe that if Germany were involved in talks between President Yanukovych and the opposition, it would ensure that there is no bloodshed. Secondly, they hope that Germany could ensure that Moscow refrain from putting pressure on Kiev if it goes ahead and forges ties with the EU. Janusz Paulus, a European expert with Germany, co-read Audenzer Stimfen in Berlin, is skeptical. The meditator role we are always being asked to play is a very difficult one, Paulus told DW. Germany cannot and should not play that role. However, Paulus conceded that Germany may know Russia a bit better than other EU states. He believes that Berlin might therefore be able to contribute to a better understanding of Russia's regional interests during talks about Ukraine and the EU. Sabine Fischer, head of the research division for Eastern Europe at the German Institute for International and Security Affairs (SWP), is also skeptical. Germany and its European partners should push for an end to the violent clash between security forces and demonstrators, she told DW. Basically, that amounts to a mediator role. Moscow criticized Westerwelle. Last week, German Foreign Minister Guido Westerwelle flew to Kiev for a 2-day meeting of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in EU, OSCE. Westerwelle visited the protesters on Independence Square, known as the Maidan, and met with opposition leaders and government officials. His visit triggered outrage in Moscow. Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov accused Westerwelle of meddling in domestic Ukrainian affairs. Berlin rejected the accusation, and even seems prepared to go a step further. According to media reports, Chancellor Merkel plans to meet with Ukrainian opposition leader and heavyweight boxing champion Vitaly Klitschko on the sideline of an upcoming EU summit in Brussels next week, signaling her support. Russia will be far more pleased. Strain on ties. Some media, including the German daily Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, warned that Ukraine might become a burden for the German-Russian relationship. But Russia experts disagree. Xaver's term as foreign minister is nearing its end, and his visit to Kiev should not be overrated. According to Vladislav Below, the head of the Center for German Studies at the Russian Academy of Science in Moscow, Merkel said Germany and Russia should not speak of their future cooperation in black and white terms, said Below, a reference to the Chancellor's desire to move away from a debate on Ukraine that narrows the approach to either or integration either with Russia or with Europe.